From Upper Michigan's election source, this is the 38th Senate District Candidate Forum. Now, here is your moderator, Steve Asplund.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 38th State Senate District Candidate Forum here on TV6. Now, Election Day is November 6th, and one of the two men you'll hear from tonight will be elected to the State Senate, representing most of Upper Michigan. The 38th State Senate District includes all of the UP except the eastern UP counties of Chippewa, Luce, and Mackinac. This is an open Senate seat, as current office holder Senator Tom Casperson is not eligible to run due to term limits. Let's meet the candidates. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Ed McBroom, he's running as a Republican and a former State House representative for the 108th State House District. Mr. McBroom is a dairy farmer from Vulcan. His wife's name is Sarah, and they have 5 children. Scott DeAnda, he's running as a Democrat and currently is the State House representative for the 110th State House District. Before politics, Mr. DeAnda owned a retail business in Calumet and worked for MDOT. His wife's name is Debbie, and they have no children. Now, before we get to the questions, let's explain some of the rules. This is a forum with some structure. It is timed. Each candidate will be asked a series of questions. Neither candidate has seen these questions in advance. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond, and following both responses to the question, they'll each have 30 seconds for rebuttal. I will be keeping time as we go throughout this forum, and we flipped a coin before we came on the air. Mr. McBroom won the toss and elected to go second. This means Mr. McBroom has chosen to deliver his closing remarks last at the end of this forum. Let's now meet our panelists who will be asking the candidates the questions. Don Ryan is a veteran broadcaster, a native and lifelong resident of Upper Michigan. Don has been in television for decades. Don is currently the host of the Ryan Report, airing Sunday mornings here on TV6. Nicole Walton is the news director and Morning Edition news anchor on Public Radio 90. Nicole has conducted countless interviews with newsmakers over the years and was also involved in the first congressional debate 2 years ago here on TV6. And our third panelist is Jamie Depew of the Mining Journal. Jamie is a lifelong resident of Upper Michigan. She's been at the newspaper for just over a year and covers the city of Marquette for the paper. Welcome to all of you. Well, we start this forum with opening remarks from each of the candidates. You each have 60 seconds, and we start with you, Mr. DeAnda.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm Scott DeAnda. I'm the candidate for the 38th Senate District. And I just want to start off by saying it's been a privilege to work for you, the people of Upper Michigan. Being the elected person in the 110th District, I'm very proud to say that it's been an honor to serve you. I look forward to serving you in the future if the voters choose to do that. I also want to say the reason that I ran in 2012 was because I want to return back to basics, to be able to see what we need in the UP. It's all about the jobs, it's all about our economy, rural health care, and education of our kids. We have to have a place where we can live, grow, and prosper, and that's why I'm running for the 38th Senate. I want to make sure that our future is just as bright as our past, and we're up here because of our natural resources. We are going to be able to prosper in the future because of those things. And I do want to say that I have always been very fiscally responsible. Being a business owner in Calumet, you had to be. When it comes to taxes, I do not want to see those things raised. I am against the pension tax that was put in place. I want it repealed. I want to see that the state income tax gets lowered. And I also want to make sure that we'll do better than we're doing now with our tax money. Because $57 billion being spent in Michigan, in my opinion, isn't being spent wisely. Gas tax, registration, and license fees have increased, and my opponent has voted for those things. I want to see Michigan get back to the basics so we can put more bread and butter on the table, and we have to make sure we got an economy that works for all of us.
Mr. DeAnda, thank you very much. Mr. McBroom.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here tonight and to get to discuss these issues with my opponent and share our views with all of you. I'm a dairy farmer, and I've grown up and done that my whole life. Went to Northern Michigan University to be a school teacher, and spent many years in the classroom in Dickinson County with band and social studies. But I saw a state that was working against the people. The legislature was working against our way of life. It was making it harder to live here. And the bureaucracy and the agencies were working against us and making it hard to live here. That motivated me to get out and run. And I was very blessed and privileged to get to serve for the 108th District and work for people all across the UP. And I'm very proud of my record and the work that we accomplished, the work we did for merit curriculum flexibility so students can study the skilled trades and look for the careers that we have available here. The opportunities that we have with natural resources, with manufacturing. They are plentiful and abound, but we need to promote an education that allows our students that access. And we need to stand against a government that works against us being able to live here, be able to enjoy the life that we have here. I went to be a farmer because it's a great place to raise children. And I don't want to see government chase anybody away from the dreams that they have to live here, to raise a family here, and to enjoy the heritage that we have here in the UP.
Thank you very much, Mr. McBroom. Our first question from Don Ryan.
Okay, let's start out, gentlemen, by talking about jobs. And the first question goes to Representative DeAnda. You know, while national unemployment rates are historically low, that's not necessarily true in all parts of the 38th Senate District, as I'm sure you know. What are your thoughts about creating jobs in our district, and particularly about using the region's mineral and forest resources for that purpose?
I think we have the best opportunity to be able to use what we have been here all along since the 1850s. We've been blessed with our natural resources. We have to expand our iron ore production. The world needs our iron ore. It needs our forest products. We have just attended Michigan Tech, and we had a partnership come from Finland, and we're seeing what they're doing. They're being able to look at new products, and that's what's going to propel the UP in the future. Sterile medical grade packaging that can be made out of wood fiber rather than oil. We're going to have to see all of the things that are going to happen with autonomous vehicles. We are the car state. We will be back on top with the natural resources that we have here. There's many things that we can make on every aspect. We got to look at the high-tech positions that we can attract. We got to expand the broadband into these rural areas. To be able to get people to come back here and live, that's what we have to do. We can do it because we have the natural resources, we've got the talent, we have to get people back in here. Michigan has to be open for the investment of capital. Just like Cliffs Natural Resources, working with my partner Sarah Cambenzi, we have to make sure that the incentives for business is going to come to Michigan, especially Upper Michigan. We're competing with Minnesota. We need to make sure that the MEDC makes sure there's a package that wants to bring them back here to Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. DeAnda.
Mr. McBroom, the question again is about jobs and particularly about using the area's mineral and forest resources.
Yeah, thank you. It's really important for us to recognize the heritage we have here in the UP and the tremendous opportunities that using our natural resources have brought to us. They have been the backbone of the Upper Peninsula, both our culture and our thriving economy. We need to make sure that the government is standing out of our way. Right now we have federal forests covering much of the UP, and yet the federal government does not allow us to properly manage those forests in a way that's beneficial to our industries and to our economy here. We have often had a DEQ that was antagonistic to the opportunities to take minerals from the ground. We need to maintain leadership, and we need a legislature that is actively overseeing those departments to make sure that they aren't enacting policies that are antagonistic to these opportunities for us. This is the backbone of our economy. We also need to make sure that we modify the way the state is cookie-cuttering out students with a one-size-fits-all education that often leads them away from career paths and opportunities that we have here in the Upper Peninsula. These are all things that I've worked very hard on while I was in the House. Got some small changes to the merit curriculum, but we need more. We need more local control so our local school boards and parents and the professionals in our classroom can work together to make sure that the students are having access to the careers that we have available here.
Mr. DeAnda, any additional thoughts or rebuttal?
I think that what we see, and we talk about the agencies in the state of Michigan that my opponent keeps bringing up, I think that it's controlled by the legislature by the way we fund those agencies. And we cannot continue to keep giving increases to these departments. That's why I voted no against the last 6 budgets. Because if we're going to complain about how Michigan is operated, the one thing that we have as the stick is the budget. We got to be able to control the agencies with the purse strings.
Mr. McBroom, any additional comments?
Well, I agree that that's an important way to take care of these agencies, but you also need legislators who are cognizant of the fact that the agencies are running roughshod over the people. Look at what they tried to do to Roger Turner and taking his pigs away. Look at what they try to do to us here in the UP with County Road 595. Look at what they tried to do to my farm by banning people with 100 cows without filling out terrible forms. Look at what we have to do to the trucking industry with 5 inches of forms to fill out to haul things versus Wisconsin with 5 pages. That takes legislative action to make sure these departments are not doing this to us anymore.
Mr. McBroom, thank you very much. Our next question goes to our panelist, Nicole Walton.
This question has to do with car insurance. The website insure.com says for the 5th year in a row, Michigan has the highest rates in car insurance in the country, with the average premium 64% more expensive than the national average. Many blame no-fault insurance and unlimited benefits for those involved in an accident. What do you think needs to be done to bring costs under control?
Yeah, thank you. This is one of the biggest issues going on during this campaign. It's been one of the biggest issues since I ever got involved with politics. The #1 call to my office when I was in the House. We need serious reform to Michigan auto insurance. And 49 other states have figured out a way to deliver insurance, some well, some not so well, but we can go to the ones that are doing it well and see they're doing it for less money than we are. It's critical that we provide consumers with the choices of how much coverage they want to purchase. It's critical that we allow senior citizens the opportunity to opt out and use Medicare. It's critical that we put fee schedules in place, fair fee schedules for our healthcare providers, so that it's not $400 for an accident in your bathtub, but $4,000 in a car accident for the exact same injury. And it's very critical that we go after the trial attorneys who are currently creating their own business enterprises around bilking the auto insurance system. And the bill that was voted on last fall in the House did those things and could have saved users over 40%, an average of 40% savings, because the bills, which were not supported by the trial attorneys and not supported by the insurance industry, mandated a 40% average return back to users. This was a good package of bills, and it should have been passed.
Thank you,
And
Mr. McBroom.
Mr. Dianda, what would you do to bring costs under control with regards to car insurance?
Well, one thing, the car insurance was outrageous. All costs of car insurance is outrageous. It's the comp and the collision that's the worst part of the bill. And when we start looking at what the car insurance bill was going to do, it was going to give those folks a carve-out for the people that chose to have lower coverage. And what we need to do with the car insurance is to be able to come up with the best that is across our nation. Because we all know bad things happen when we get in a car accident. And we should have the opportunity as a Michigander to pick what is needed for us. And we need to pick a rate that's going to keep us in our homes when we get done, when we have a bad accident. And I think the biggest part with the car insurance that I want people to understand, when we have a bill that was written by the car insurance companies for their benefit, that's why it did not pass. And when we had Sam Bernstein, the ambulance chaser from Detroit and the mayor of Detroit, that was the author of the bill, the UP was not going to have the savings that my opponent keeps talking about. There was going to be harm to us. And like I say, when people are driving down the road drunk and people are causing accidents and things are happening, we want to see something that's going to be there for us, the customer, not just to benefit the insurance companies. They got enough people looking to protect them. It's called a lobby court. They got attorneys, they got everybody on their side. You have to have people as elected officials that are going to stand up for our benefit to make sure when you're in an accident that the hospital bill's covered, because they're not going to take a chicken. They're going to have to be paid, and somebody's going to have to pay that.
Mr. Dianda, thank you very much. Mr. McBroom, your response?
Well, the thing is, that bill wasn't supported by the trial attorneys. The bill wasn't supported by the insurance companies. They were both unhappy with it. And the bill provided those savings and still maintained Michigan auto insurance as being the best coverage in the whole country, 5 times better than the next state. It protected us, and it did deliver savings to us. Sure, Detroit, which is paying $5,500 a policy, 40% off for them is more cash. But I don't know any Youper who's paying $2,000 for their kid's minivan who wouldn't like to get 40% off of that coverage too.
Mr. McBroom, thank you. Mr. Dianda.
I think that what has happened out there is that we have had this discussion about car insurance for so long that people just lose the facts. And it comes down to one thing. If we're not going to address the problems about charging women 40% more for auto insurance, or when you're laid off of your job that you're getting charged more because you missed a credit card payment, or if you have a PhD, you're going to be charged less than the person that graduated from high school. When we change insurance, it's got to be good for the consumer, and those things have to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Danda. Our next question is from our panelist, Jamie Depew. Jamie?
Hi, gentlemen. This question deals with health insurance. After the legislature approved the Healthy Michigan Plan in 2014, about 655,000 residents signed up for health care coverage. According to a University of Michigan study released in September, many low-income residents have experienced fewer debt problems since obtaining health insurance. How will you ensure affordable health care remains accessible for low-income residents?
Mr. Danda, you're first.
The first thing that we have to do to make sure that their health care is low is to be able to have access to rural hospitals. And that's what's the biggest thing that we have now. We got to look at more telemedicine. People are needing the broadband in their communities so they don't have to go into the doctors for everything. We have to make sure that that's available to the seniors who doesn't have to travel and leave their homes. That's all an expense on there. Also, just not with premiums, it's the travel. We have to make sure that we are going to have rural hospitals in our areas to be able to service our people. And if we're going to be able to keep those hospitals open, like in Dickinson County, we're going to have to come up with better partners. Because these hospitals are expensive to run, and if we want trauma centers, we're going to have to be able to have that for everyone.
Mr. McBroom.
When we passed that law, that was something that a lot of folks have been able to take advantage of, but the federal government was promising a significant amount of money to help pay for that. And while that lasts, that's a good thing for us here in Michigan. But we need to do more to reduce the costs and to promote access, as my opponent was saying. It's really critical that we look at why is it that we can't cross state lines? Why is it that when a patient from Michigan is sent to Green Bay, the Green Bay hospitals get 100% reimbursed for their requests, but our hospitals here in the UP don't get that? That's really hurting our hospitals, particularly Iron Mountain and other places along the border. It's important that we look for opportunities to reduce the cost and continue to allow access to come forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. McBroom. And we'll take a break right now and return with more of the 38th State Senate District debate after this. Welcome back to the 38th State Senate District Forum. We're here at TV6 and we're questioning both state Senate candidates, Ed McBroom on the Republican side, and also the Democratic candidate, Scott Danda. We join now with the second round of questions, and we start off with Nicole Walton, and we started off with Mr. McBroom's response.
Mr. McBroom, this has to do with marijuana. Proposal 1 on the November ballot would legalize recreational marijuana for those 21 and older. The Michigan Senate Fiscal Agency says that could generate $262 million through sales and excise taxes and application fees by fiscal year 2023. Many law enforcement agencies say legalization would result in more traffic fatalities, additional health care costs, and higher school dropout rates. What is your position on Proposal 1 and why?
Thank you. I'm opposing Proposal 1. I think that Michigan has made significant strides in the realms of medical marijuana and the ability for folks to access that and utilize that, particularly with some of the changes that we were able to make recently for medibles and for the oils and for dispensaries. These were all important changes to update a law that was passed by the voters in 2008. But the outright legalization of recreational marijuana, I believe, has many of those downsides that you mentioned already. And if you look at several of the states that have done this, I think that truth is borne out in increased traffic problems and increased police costs in general. So I would prefer that to not pass. If it does pass, it'll become the law and we'll have to work around and figure out how to make it work and provide the services at the local level.
Thank you very much. Mr. Danda?
Yes, I think that what's going to happen is we are going to know because it's on the ballot and it's going to be the will of the people. And being endorsed by all law enforcement across the state, I hear their concerns. And being able to go to the Marquette Economic Club with Mr. Baldini, we had a program just on this subject from Colorado, the people that set it up for state taxation and how that was brought into the state of Colorado. There was a lot of concerns, but there was a lot of folks that were happy with revenue. The problem that I see is the more revenue that we generate in the state, the bigger it's going to get. And then we're going to have to start putting in more concerns with how much more are we going to start funding the state police, the sheriffs, what is their costs? What is it going to come down to on the local level? It's a big concern for me. What are we going to do with the money? Where is it going to go to benefit the people that are having a lot of issues out there? Mental health would be a place where we could put some of those taxes that would be raised because it's desperately needed.
Thank you very much. Mr. McBroom, your rebuttal.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Representative DeAnda said. However, the proposal really restricts much of where that revenue is going to go to. And it doesn't go to unworthy things, but to education and to roads. But we need then to find revenue sources to provide for law enforcement and for the safety and well-being of our communities.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeAnda.
With $5 billion now going to the roads, with another $600 million that was voted against the people's will of 80% on the ballot initiative, I have my reservations on that because we just don't see the roads getting fixed the way they need to be done. So I'm very concerned about having the state of Michigan say that we're going to put more money into roads and we're still going to have the same kind of potholes and bridge deck repairs that are not getting done. So it's a big concern to me for oversight.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Jamie Depew of the Mining Journal. Jamie?
Thank you. This question deals with community mental health services. According to a 2018 Upper Peninsula Community Health Needs Assessment, every UP county but Marquette is a federally designated health professional shortage area for mental health care based on the number of psychiatrists per capita. Across the UP, there are just 39 inpatient beds and 8 full-time psychiatrists serving the population of around 300,000, which is roughly 1 psychiatrist per 39,000 people. Do you see this as a problem, and if not, why? If so, what would you do to help create additional community mental health services in the UP?
Mr. DeAnda, you're first.
It's very personal to me, and it is very personal to Ed, because we lost Representative Kivala. He was not just our friend and our colleague, he was our brother from the UP. Severe problems with alcoholism. We lost John. And 3 weeks after we lost him, the governor cut $3 million out of the mental health budget. We have $1.6 billion that's being spent in this state. It has been going to corporate welfare. In my opinion, that money has to come back and be returned. And we have to make sure that all our local hospitals will get reimbursed for mental health to put those beds in Michigan. We cannot transport our people from the UP to Lower Michigan in the back of a cop car. We cannot do that any longer. We have to have facilities here. We have to have people that are trained to take care of people, because we should all be ashamed for not getting that done, and especially with the loss of John. Thank you.
Mr. McBroom.
It's also, obviously, as Rep. DeAnda said, a personal struggle, and many folks around the UP are feeling that in their own families. We've had significant disinvestment in mental health services and in substance abuse services. That needs to be changed. Both Governor Engler and Governor Granholm stripped away money that came from alcohol sales that went into substance abuse coordinating agencies. That needs to be changed. I introduced legislation to stop the police from having to haul folks downstate in the back of a cop car who need medical treatment, and it's ridiculous that they have to spend 10 hours in the car to get there. We need the facilities here. We need to work to find solutions with our local healthcare providers in a way that helps us with the funding issues that come with that problem. There's great opportunities using Northern and other schools to make sure that we get more psychiatrists in the UP, because we are vastly underserved in that regard. There's a lot of things that can be done. One of the important changes that needs to be made is for mental health parity. Right now, you go into the hospital with a heart problem or things or any other medical problem, and you see the insurance coverage move forward. But if it's a mental health issue, they don't have the same treatments. They don't have the same continuance of care because we don't have mental health parity in this state. That was something I voted for back in my first term, that we should have mental health parity, and that could help us make significant strides forward as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dandy, your response?
My response is it doesn't run on love. It takes money to be able to do these things. We have to quit talking about legislation and what we're going to do. We have to fund these things. We can do those funding things. We can do it by saying to the governor, we are not going to vote for your budget unless you put the money into mental health. And when I get to Lansing for the next rounder, we're going to make sure whoever governor is going to have that direct message. We will hold the budget until the money goes where it needs to be with the people.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Yes, sir?
I get a rebuttal.
Right.
Sorry.
I was just going to ask her to repeat the question, but by all means, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the budget is legislation. So whether we're passing policy laws or budgetary acts, that's the legislature's job, and it needs to do both. It needs to find a way to fund this, and I listed several of the ways we can do that. It's important that we look and see that this is a real problem and that the UP is vastly underutilized, and we need to send someone there who knows how to build teams and work with other members of the legislature, because you only get 4 people from the UP in the legislature. And it's so critical that you be able to build the relationships and get things done, like John Kievala was so good at doing, and work together to get the votes from the other members of the state legislature who don't live here and aren't familiar with our problems.
Thank you very much. Our next question goes to our panelist, Don Ryan.
And we start with Mr. McBroom on this one. You know, the issue of school safety was brought back into our public consciousness with the mass shootings in Parkland, Florida, and Santa Fe, New Mexico earlier this year. The legislature did provide some funding for this purpose, but many feel it's not adequate. What are your thoughts generally on making our schools more safe? And do you feel we should be willing to spend more money if that's what's needed?
Absolutely. We need to provide those services. The legislature in the most recent budget did appropriate significant funds to schools to update safety protocols. I think that local control and decision making is critical to establishing what kind of safety changes a school is going to make. It shouldn't be Lansing making every school district in the state do the exact same thing. We need to allow the locals that control, and we need to give them the funding to make those decisions, or allow them the flexibility in their current funding mechanisms, such as sinking funds or millages, to make the changes they need. We also need to look at how do we increase the security in our schools. We have too long thought that because the school is there and it's a gun-free zone, that the police don't need to have a significant presence there. I think we need to change that. I think that that is just as much a part of our communities that our citizens are paying for protection for as any other place within our cities and counties. I think that's an important part of that equation as well.
Mr. Diana, the question again is school safety, and should we be willing to spend more money if that's necessary?
We most definitely have to spend more money to make sure that our kids are safe. And they have to be done in a right and respectful way, and it has to be done with local control. We have to have the school board make the decisions to what they need, whether it's in Ontonagon County or if it's in Oakland County. We have to make sure that the money per pupil, like my opponent said, is going to be increased, but not with the pittance that was thrown out in this last budget. We, in the last 5 years, $4.5 billion worth of money got taken out of the K through 12 to shore up the general fund. Unacceptable. We have to be able to give the money back per pupil to take care of what we're not funding. Not just locking the front door, but making sure that we have more counselors rather than one for every 792 students. We got to start putting the money into the schools to return to the levels of safety, education, and building these kids up to be able to identify where they want to go in the future. Skilled trades. If we want to go to higher ed, we got to be able to have that discussion, and it's going to take dollars. We got the highest cost of energy in the UP, transportation costs are more, and now we are having a problem with being able to attract more people to teach in school.
Thank you very much.
Any rebuttal, Mr. McBroom?
I think you see that Representative DeAnda and I are very much on the same page on this issue in supporting the funding that schools need for security and the funding they need to run their programs in general. I think we have a lot of opportunity to talk about updating the way we fund our schools into a way that's more fair to the Upper Peninsula, especially in regards to declining enrollment. That wasn't the general direction of this question, but I think those are important things that I hope we get a chance to discuss yet today.
Any additional comments, Mr. Diamond?
I just think, again, if we're going to be able to make these schools safe, we're going to have to give them the funding that's needed. Because in Lower Michigan, some of these per pupil heads, for the amount of money that they're getting, is $12,000 to $14,000. They already have the metal detectors in, but they don't have the cost of transportation, energy, and running the schools. So I think that's where it has to be funded. Everything has to be funded at a better level.
Thank you very much. We'll have more from the 38th State Senate District Candidate Forum coming up after these messages. Welcome back. I'm Steve Asplund, your moderator for the 38th State Senate District Candidate Forum. We're here at TV6 talking with the candidates for both the Democratic and Republican parties. Scott DeAnda for the Democrats, Ed McBroom for the Republicans. We have this next round of questioning, and we start off with our panelist, Jamie Depew.
Thanks,
Jamie?
Steve. This question is about Michigan's Proposal 2 that's going to be on the November ballot. Michigan's Proposal 2 would create an independent redistricting commission of 13 registered voters randomly selected by Michigan's Secretary of State. Proponents of Proposal 2, organized by the group Voters Not Politicians, envision the commission as an antidote for gerrymandering in the state. However, the idea of the amendment is not popular or even accepted by everyone. What is your stance on creating an independent redistricting commission?
Mr. DeAnda, you're first.
It's another one where it's going to be interesting what the people of the state of Michigan want. I think that we have been challenged in the past, no matter who's in power, for how we are going to see district lines. Not so much cut in the UP, because it's pretty difficult that they could gerrymander in areas. The last area that was gerrymandered in Upper Michigan was in the 110th district back in 2010 when Ishpeming Township was put into the 110th district. So that's the last time we've seen something of that nature happen over here. And then in the Senate district, we saw that happened with Lewis County. It's no longer in the 38th Senate. So what I feel is it's more fair that I believe that we can have an independent people to look at it, because every time it gets redistricted downstate, people are upset, no matter what party's in control or what party's in the minority. So it's going to be interesting to see. And again, I'm going to welcome the view of the people on the ballot.
Thank you very much. Mr. McBroom?
I support an independent commission being established, but I would have preferred that we had done a slight tweak to the 1963 Constitution, which prescribed the original commission for redistricting, and would have had 2 Upper Peninsula residents on that commission. This current proposal, Proposal 2, will very likely have nobody from the Upper Peninsula. I think that it's somewhat of a mischaracterization when folks talk, well, this is going to be a nonpartisan, when specifically people are selected for their partisan nature. But having a commission will be fine. It's not going to be the end of the world, but I do think that it's a real shame that you're losing 4 people from the Upper Peninsula who have a vote, who are elected and are accountable to the voters, who get a say in redistricting, and changing that instead to probably nobody from the Upper Peninsula.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeAnda, your response?
I guess what my response is this, is that when we see that the Chamber of Commerce of Michigan was so very engaged in the redistricting, I think that is what's brought this issue to be put on the ballot, because it wasn't fair for a lot of districts, and I think people just said, enough's enough. We're going to get involved with it.
Mr. McBroom?
I served on the last redistricting committee. I know why Ishpeming Township was moved over. It was no nefarious plot, and in fact it made the 110th district more pro-Democrat, which as Republicans, why would we have done that if we were trying to gerrymander the districts? Moving Lewis County was necessary because of population. And as was Ishpeming Township. What you're going to discover, and the folks will discover who get on this commission, is that the laws are very restrictive on how the district lines are drawn. Federal laws, state laws, and you're not going to see a significant change in how the lines are ultimately drawn, whether we continue with the legislature or move to a independent commission.
Thank you very much. Our next question goes to our panelist, Don Ryan.
And the question goes first to former Representative McBroom. Many people are very concerned about Enbridge Line 5 through the Straits of Mackinac. The governor recently announced an agreement to work with Enbridge to build a tunnel which would include that line. Do you agree with that decision, and do you support it?
I do support it. That is an important decision to update the infrastructure for the Upper Peninsula and downstate. Line 5 is a vital part of the economy of the UP, delivering over 70% of the propane that we need here, delivering natural gas downstate, picking up natural gas from the various wells across the northern lower peninsula. It is the #1 ratepayer to UPCO. It is providing hundreds of jobs across the UP. This infrastructure is old, it needs an update, and the tunnel is a great opportunity to reach this compromise of maintaining the important and vital infrastructure that we need here while also protecting the Great Lakes more than ever. When folks talk about alternatives, they really need to look back at what happened to us in 2014 during the propane crisis and the terrible winter we had. Line 5 was shut down a portion of that time. We were suddenly having to run trucks to Missouri, Louisiana, look for trains to bring it up here. We only have one unloading spot in the UP for rail cars with propane. We do not have the alternatives that we need to deliver this service. Line 5 remains critical, and I'm glad a compromise has been reached.
Representative Dianda, your thoughts on Enbridge Line 5 and the solution that's been proposed?
Well, the solution is something that I agree with. I mean, we have to come up with something that is going to be the best to service not just Lower Michigan with their oil needs, but also with us with our propane. And I think that we got to start looking at bigger picture here. What are we going to do for the future with energy in the UP? How is it going to be more efficient? Are we going to be able to use that tunnel in the next big thing with our broadband? Are we going to be able to expand with the Enbridge line that's encased in that tunnel? Are we going to be able to have the discussion of what's going to make our UP a better place to be? I think that the safety issue of it is key. I think that I have a little bit of an issue with having it as the Mackinac Bridge Authority. I've been contacted by the Bridge Authority, and they're a little concerned about having that in their place. So I think that what we're going to see in the future is a discussion about what is the best and what can we do to make that tunnel either bigger to accommodate more things in it for future. And I think that that's something that is important to all of us, because we have to have propane in the UP. We cannot continue to have discussions about shutting down Pipeline 5 and having our people that are going to be without propane for our area.
Any other thoughts, Mr. McBroom?
Well, I think it's great to mention that the line, especially with Michigan Tech's help, is going to be large enough to house these additional utilities. Broadband, electrical, it's going to have cameras on it and be able to be visibly inspected. I think these are all tremendous assets, and Enbridge is going to pay for it. It's not going to be a taxpayer expense. I think all of these are great reasons to continue to support this effort.
Representative Dianda?
I think that we got to think big, though. We got to think about this tunnel in an aspect of what are they doing in other European countries, too. There's a tunnel from France to England, 22 miles. What can we think on a bigger level for economic development for the UP? What else can we talk about for the future that's going to improve more jobs in this setting?
Thank you very much. Our next question goes to Nicole Walton, and she'll be asking the question first to Mr. Dianda.
This question has to do with roads. Roads across Michigan are crumbling, yet no one can seem to come up with a way, in agreement, to deal with them. Lower revenue sharing means that reduced money for local budgets. Governor Snyder says the state has increased fees and fuel taxes and says there needs to be an increase in the federal gas tax. What do you think is the best way to fix Michigan roads?
Well, I think one of the things that's going to fix Michigan roads is going to have to be, the roads have to be a priority. I spent 10 years working on those roads. I understand that issue very well. We are not doing the maintenance on the roads currently to the standard that needs to be done. We just think that we're going to repave everything across Michigan, but we don't want to have the maintenance done on this. The bridge decks have to be repaired on an annual basis. Potholes have to be replaced in Michigan, and that has to be the #1 priority for the $5 billion that we have and the $600 million that was put on the taxpayers with the increase in registration, license plate, and the gas tax. Do I believe that we need a little bit from the feds? Of course, but we are working the system on a 1950 model, and no dollar should be spent unless it's going for those road surfaces. And the priority in Michigan, when we're serving in the legislature and we find out there's waste of $10 million where there's rail cars that were sitting in Durant, Michigan that were never going to be used, that was a waste of taxpayers' money. It was something that could have been used to fix our roads. All of those things have to be addressed. Money has to go for the people that are putting it in their tank and paying that tax.
Mr. McBroom, what would you do to fix Michigan roads?
Well, I'm glad that my colleague has mentioned the rail car issue and holding government accountable. I led that investigation into those rail cars and into that waste of money, and we need more legislative oversight into the Department of Transportation. But we also need to look at the way our funding is structured. We have one of the stupidest ways of raising taxes for roads because we have some of the highest taxes at the pump and yet pay some of the least amount of that money to roads. We need a significant generational restructuring of the way we're funding roads and the way we're getting tax revenue to do it. That proposal was voted down. My colleague was one of the ones who voted against that. We put up several other plans. Eventually there was a plan I supported that is raising revenue, as you mentioned, and it's also requiring us to pay money from the general fund. These are ways that we're getting more money, and you saw even the strike this summer is evidence of the fact that more money, significant road construction projects are moving forward in the coming years. But we should also give more ability to our local road agencies at the city and county to do these projects. They have a better bang for the buck. They're a better opportunity to do a lot of these projects if we could turn a lot more of that control over to them. And within that new structure, I was very proud to sponsor an amendment that increased the homestead property tax credit, which offset the increase in the license and registration fee increases for most UP residents. That was an important thing because property taxes are truly regressive, go to anything, whereas road taxes and fees go directly to the roads.
Mr. DeAnda, your response.
When my opponent wants to have oversight meetings, I asked the governor in 2 resolutions to fire the director at MDOT, Kurt Steidl, for his incompetence on not just that issue, but a few more. Because I feel strongly that every tax dollar that we're spending has to be accounted for. I don't need another study. I don't need another committee meeting. I need action. I need government responsible to the executive to make sure that the agencies are doing what we're paying them to do.
Thank you very much. Mr. McBroom, your response?
I think that it's all well and good to go out and demand the governor do things, but you have to figure out a way to make those things happen. Chairing the committee, holding the hearings is the process that our Constitution calls for. All the demands in the world, the governor fire somebody, amounted to nothing. They didn't happen. Instead, we had the hearings. We forced MDOT to come to the table, admit to us that they were making mistakes, and change that policy and hold them accountable so they stopped wasting that money.
Thank you very much. We'll take a break right now and return with more of the 38th State Senate District Candidate Forum after these messages. Welcome back, everyone, to the 38th State Senate Candidate Forum, and we're talking with Republican Ed McBroom and Democrat Scott DeAnda. We have a final question now from our panelist, Don Ryan, and we're going to direct that toward Mr. McBroom.
Okay. You know, it's generally agreed today that young people need a solid educational base for career and job training, no matter what career they might choose. I guess the question becomes, are we doing enough at each level? And what would you like to see us do to improve that system?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, flexibility within the Michigan Merit Curriculum is extremely important, and returning the local control over graduation requirements and curriculum decisions is vital to seeing our communities thrive, to allowing our professionals in the classroom to do the job they're trained to do. So those are critical points to your question. But on a larger basis, I see that the state is really too often thinking about one size fits all, and too often stuck in old systems. We've abandoned adult education in this state, and we've taken for granted that when folks graduate at 18, they must be adults, they must be ready and mature and ready to go, and they should go to college oftentimes is where we push them. And we neglect those who dropped out. We don't provide the services anymore that they need for adult education, and that's a real shame. And we put somebody into a trap of, I either have to work today to pay for my apartment, or I can go to school and better myself, but I can't do both. And I significantly would like to see some change in that regard. Higher education, we need more accountability to drive the better efficiencies, because the amount of money we spend right now on higher education versus the amount of debt our students walk out with is not right. And the state has put enormous caps on them for in-state tuition, but the rates continue to skyrocket for out-of-state tuition, and Michigan Tech and other schools that could draw in many from out of state are really having a hard time doing that because of the rates.
Representative Dianda, so the real question is, are we doing enough to prepare young people for their future as far as careers and job training goes?
Not at all. We're not doing enough. More needs to be done. We have to start, again, like I said before, with the funding. It's all about the money. It doesn't run on rainbows. It runs on dollars. We have to be able to look at the things that happened over the last 8 years. Because I want to ask you, has it gotten better or worse? You have to decide that. I know in my mind it's worse. The priorities in the state of Michigan cannot be with the DeVos family wanting to have the money from our taxes go to the charter schools that are for profit. Why don't we start rolling that back? Why don't we take that money back that's our money by the taxpayers? Our dollars have to go into paying for what we need. And it's happening across the state, and it needs to end. All of those things need to end, because we can't do early childhood development. We can't do training for anybody anymore because we don't have the dollars. It takes local control. It takes dollars. It's our tax money. It has to be put back in our system.
Mr. McBroom, any rebuttal?
I agree with much of what my opponent said about making sure the dollars are available. We need to restructure the way we're funding our schools. We need to make sure that we're holding the state accountable. I support an amendment to make sure that the school aid fund is restricted to K-12. We also need to really consider how we are changing policy at the legislature all the time in the efforts to try to make education better. Both parties, neither of them getting it right. One side, oh, push the standardized testing. The other side, push the programming. When we need to return that control to the local level, the state of Michigan cannot fix these problems all the way from Lansing. It should be given the funding to the locals so that they can do their job.
Representative Dianda?
What my opponent has said, education, making sure the local control gets done, making sure we make those changes. You cannot take money from the DeVos family that wants privatization for charter schools and stand here and say what you want for education. Free public education in the Constitution is what we have to go back to.
Thank you very much. We've reached a segment in our program where we're going to offer the final comments from each of the candidates. As we spoke at the top of the hour, Mr. McBroom won the toss and he's elected to go second. So we'll start our final closing remarks, and each of them has 90 seconds in which to respond, with Mr. Scott Dianda.
I want to thank everyone for watching this program tonight. I want to make sure that people realize one thing. I have one thing that I want to do for you, is serve you as the next senator of the UP. I will not compromise on what we need done. I will make sure that we always vote for things that are good for us, no matter whose bill it is. A Democratic idea, a Republican idea, if it's a good idea from one of the parties, I'll support it. But if there's any harm that's going to come to us in the UP, I'm going to definitely be a no on that. Because we have to get back to the basics. We got to get back to the bread and butter on the table, having good jobs, rural health care, and the future for our children. We talked about things here today, about mental health that has to be funded, about the roads that have to be funded, about local government with revenue sharing, the dark store issues that has to be taken care of. All of these things that are affecting us in the UP are about who's going to fight the hardest to be able to get things done for you, the citizens of the UP. And I want to do that. I have the time and the ability to go to Lansing and work for you directly. I'm not going to take any time to do anything less. And I think that people got to realize one thing. You need to ask yourself, in Michigan, are you better off today than you were 8 years ago? Is the cost of gasoline any cheaper? Are your taxes any lower? Are we going to be able to see people that are going to be able to stay here and come back? Or are people like our seniors going to go to Florida or Arizona because they don't have to have a pension tax there? Are we going to start seeing that industry is going to come back into Michigan? Are we going to give the money to people that are trying to come into Michigan, like Amazon, or are we going to put the money here locally to get the empire back open and put our people to work?
Thank you very much. Mr. McBroom, your closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much to TV6 and to panelists and everyone for hosting this. It's been a real honor to be with you and to come into folks' homes tonight to talk about these things. First off, I'd like to say I'm not endorsed by the DeVosses. In fact, they endorsed my opponent in the primary. They're very unhappy with my policies and ideas about education. I'm running because I want to protect a way of life. I want to protect our opportunity to live here. I want to stand in the gap for the people, for my family, against a government that either through legislation or regulation continues to make it difficult to stay here. Auto insurance is the #1 low-hanging fruit that will return money back into the pockets of the people. We can do this. We had a good bill that could do these things. Wasn't supported by the insurance, wasn't supported by the trial attorneys. Both Democrats and Republicans voted yes. Those who voted no, they've got to go. I'm also supporting changes to property tax, one of the most regressive taxes. That's why I supported raising the homestead property tax credit. I ran the last successful bill that reduced income taxes. I believe that it's important you have someone from the UP who can speak strongly, who can fight, but you also need someone who knows how to work with other people, who knows how to bridge the gaps, bring people on board, and if you look at my record in the House of Representatives, you'll see that I have a very strong record of accomplishment, of working with people from both sides of the aisle and from both sides of the bridge to get real results that have made a difference for us in the UP. You ask, are we better off? There's a lot of things that are going great. Very exciting times for manufacturing and business, but there's a lot of things we still need to get done, and I'm anxious to get back to work for you. Thank you very much.
And thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our candidates as well for joining us tonight. And also thanks to you at home and those here at TV6 that made this all possible. We hope this forum has given you some direction on who and how you'll vote November 6th. Whoever wins, they serve Upper Michigan as our state senator for the next 4 years. Wherever you live in the UP, look over the ballot issues and candidates in your community before voting. Be informed and vote. Your voice is only heard if you cast your ballot on November 6th. Thank you for joining us, and good night.